Welcome back. Today we're going to get started with SingleStore and Go. To get started with Go and SingleStore is easy, just a three-step process. First, we sign up for a SingleStore license. This is free. Second, we spin up a cluster either in the cloud, in virtual machines, or in containers. And third, we adjust the connection details and run our app. Let's dig in. First up, we'll fill in this form, and once we've filled in the form and clicked on the link in the email, we'll land here in the customer portal. I've clicked on software licenses, and I can grab my software license key to be able to set it in place. I'm going to choose to spin up my cluster in Docker Compose, and here in the Docker Compose file, we just create the license key environment variable, and we're ready to go. As it spins up, it will also run init.sql, which will put our content in place. I've spun up the cluster, and we're ready to go. Step 1 done. Step 2 done. Here in SingleStore Studio, let's take a look at our database. I can take a look at the memory and disk usage and the health of my cluster. Let's click into SQL Editor. I'll pick the database that we created as we started the application, and let's select all the data in the database. Great, we already have one row ready to go. Now let's look at our application. We use the standard MySQL driver here, and we create a struct that mirrors the data in the data store. Now we can adjust the connection details to match our database. In this case, they're set perfectly for the Docker Compose file. In this sample application, we'll create a row, read a row, update a row, read all the rows, and delete a row. Let's run this app and see how it runs. That worked out great. Let's look at the code and see how this application functions. Now in this application, the goal is to show all of the different mechanisms for connecting to this data store. So we're going to start out creating a row. Then we'll read one row. If we get back our row, we'll print that row. Then we'll update the row. Where it used to say inserted, it will now say updated. Print that row. Then we'll read all the rows to show not only the row that we just inserted, but also the row that we created as we first instantiated the database. And then finally, we'll delete the row. Let's take a look at each function. Here in the create function, insert into messages, content, values, we'll use this question mark to avoid SQL injection. We'll pass that parameter as we go do this. So here we are, executing that statement, and we'll get the last inserted ID. Perfect. Read one. Select ID, content, create date for messages where ID equals question mark. So we'll execute this and get back that row, casting it into our struct. Read all. Select star from messages. So whether we're using select star or we're enumerating the specific fields, both work great with SingleStore. Here when we read all, we'll go grab all of the rows, cast them into our struct, and return that array. Perfect. As we update the row, we will set the content where the ID matches this ID, and we'll execute that. And finally, as we delete, that's really straightforward. Delete where the ID matches. So here, after we authenticate to our database and open that MySQL connection to SingleStore, we'll insert the row, read one row, update the row, read all the rows, and finally delete the row that we just created. Let's run it again. We inserted row 3. We read row 3, and here's row 3 with our ID, our content, and our date. We updated row 3, so now it doesn't say created, it says updated. We also see the original row we created when we instantiated the database, and finally we deleted row 3. That worked out great. Grab a link to this starter repository in the description below and get started with SingleStore and Go today. Thanks for watching.